Hey everybody, Garry Adelman, American Battlefield Trust. Man, we continue to approach particularly popular places of the battlefield, but we're still sort of off the beaten path here. We are right off the edge of the saddle between the round tops. Big Round Top is behind me, Little Round Top is off in this direction, and Vincent Spur, the famous place where the 20th Maine actually fought, is right off in the distance there. That intersection you see over there is right in the saddle between the two round tops. And we're not going to be talking about the fight for Little Round Top right now, at least not very much. What we're going to be talking about is after the fight, the soldiers built some stone walls. Here are some of them right here, okay? They built these after the fighting was over. A lot of good it did them then. But these are some of the only walls on the entire battlefield actually built by soldiers. So this is important. We've got some guests. We're going to be taking a trip up, not Little Round Top, but Big Round Top. Most of you probably haven't done it. And we're going to go the old way, up the old path. And the first thing we'll come to is one of the units that helped build these walls, the 10th Pennsylvania Reserves. This is a 5th Corps unit. This is Samuel Wiley's Crawford's division. And these guys ended up on the north side of Little Round Top. Some of them were later moved to the south side of Little Round Top and up Big Round Top. And this is, to my knowledge, the only monument on the entire battlefield which is made entirely of bronze. There are some that are close, but they have stone bases with them, such as the 56th Pennsylvania. But what a beautiful monument with the Maltese cross sitting on there. And then, you know, this was a very popular monument for a while. There was a road that went right by it, not the one we just crossed, but this one right over here behind me. There was an old avenue. I'm going to bring up Tim Smith to talk about some of the sort of 1890s look of this area. Tim?
Yeah, you know, this area has changed dramatically, mostly because of the removal of the original West Confederate Avenue or South Confederate Avenue, and of course the placement of the modern South Confederate Avenue, and then also the removal of a Gettysburg National Military Park Commission path that went to the summit of Big Round Top. And we're going to explore that path and walk along the remnants of that path here in a few minutes. But basically, on July 3rd, 1863, elements of Crawford's division, as Gary mentioned, and other 5th Corps units from even Vincent's brigade and Schweitzer and Tilton's brigade were positioned along the slopes of Big Round Top, and they built a stone wall. Now that stone wall has been improved, but the base of the stone wall is still there. And this path put in by the GM, the Gettysburg National Military Park Commission, actually follows the course of this original defensive position to the top of the hill, and of course it passes monuments. And when this path was removed and the more modern road was put in and the new path was put up the Big Round Top, the new path doesn't pass by these really cool historical features that people visited for many years. So we're going to talk about some of that.
Yeah, we're gonna cut in a second, but just real quick. So this is where the old road went. That's why sometimes you go around the battlefield of Gettysburg and other battlefields which have also moved roads, largely because early vehicles did not go very fast, and you could have hairpin turns, and then suddenly they started going 20 and 30 miles an hour, and you needed to get rid of those hairpin turns. But that's why you'll come across a brigade plaque in the middle of nowhere. How many people could ever see this from South Confederate Avenue? But now that you know and you follow the old roads, you're going to see this, and when we follow the old path, we're going to take you by some monuments you probably hardly ever get to see, and some on the crest as well, which you are perfectly able to see. There's a path up there, but some reason they find that climb difficult, and very few visitors actually go to the crest of Big Round Top.
And of course, the reason people wanted to go to the crest of Big Round Top at one time was because it was a large observation tower on the top of the hill. It was 60 feet high, and it had an incredible view of the Gettysburg battlefield. And so this path had a purpose to the end of it, so you could climb up even more steps to the top. And how many steps were there?
Oh, God, you got me. I know how many steps were on this path here.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant? 116 stone steps created in about 1897 by the Farrell brothers under contract to the U.S. government. I thought you were asking me about the observation tower. Let's close here with my greatest hope that when we get to the top and talk about the observation tower, Tim will break out some of his salacious stories that he has read in the newspaper about that tower and why it's gone.
And we're walking along here on the original path. You can notice the steps have been torn out here. We're just above the 9th Massachusetts Infantry. 9th Massachusetts Infantry is part of the 5th Corps. They have a monument just below us. You can notice that this path heading up Big Round Top isn't so much, stairs right now. We'll come across some areas that had stairs on it, but this is very much like a woodland path. So if you do want to try to take this pathway, be sure that you come out here and feel that you're up to it and wear the appropriate footwear as well as leg wear, because you're going to find ticks, poison ivy, and other things along this way, but we're all set today. And here's another section here that you can see. This is more of an actual pathway where the steps would have sat. You can see some of the old concrete here. So these are pretty cool. Chris Mackowski ahead of us has made his way up and over top of one of the old stone step sections. So as you're coming up here, we have loose rocks to deal with, but we also have a fairly clear path. Most people wouldn't know about. Yeah, now we're about a third of the way up Big Round Top. We've trekked along the old pathway, and we're standing at one of the coolest monuments, I think, on the Gettysburg battlefield. It's the 118th Pennsylvania, known as the Corn Exchange Regiment. They come out of Philadelphia, and there's actually a really cool building down near Independence Hall called the Corn Exchange. And you can see some beautiful artwork on the side of the building, which is actually integrated into this unit's monument. Here, you can see the corn with the Maltese Cross of the 5th Corps. The 118th Pennsylvania will fight over in the wheat field on July 2nd. They'll be pushed out of the wheat field whenever the Confederates start to make their initial attacks. They'll have two monuments over in that area, one near the Stony Hill, and then the other one will be along the Wheatfield Road, as Tim Smith reminded us of. Now, thing you have to keep in mind, they're part of the 1st Division of the 5th Corps. Now, there are 3 brigades in that division, and they're going to go off into the wheat field, 2 of them. The 3rd Brigade will actually go to Little Round Top, that's Strong Vincent's brigade. So this division is very undersized at this point. We have 1 brigade on Little Round Top. We have 2 more brigades down in the wheat field. And to make matters worse, yet one of their largest regiments, the 9th Massachusetts Infantry, not the battery, the infantry, are actually on the other side of Gettysburg throughout most of the day, along a picket line near Brinkerhoff Ridge. So these guys are going to come into this area, put their monument at the bottom. That'll be the 9th Massachusetts. The 118th Pennsylvania, who saw a lot of action here, will put up 3 monuments. And to me, this is my favorite of the 3.
Good. Thanks, Chris. And we're going to continue our walk.
Okay, here we are at a place that I refer to as Gibraltar. Now, in the book that William C. Rhodes wrote after the war, it came out in the early 1900s, he mentioned that the 15th Alabama Infantry in the assault came up and over Big Round Top. He mentioned that the right of his line passed the area where the observatory now is located. And we know where that observatory was on top of the hill. He then said he came over slightly down the hill into position, and his men were lined up where the path to the observatory now is. And he mentioned that it was a low slope that came up the northern side of the hill, and it was crowned by a huge cliff of rocks. And he said that he thought that he should halt here at this location, and he actually, a staff officer from Law came up and told him that he was expected to continue the attack and hit Little Round Top. But then he drew the staff officer's attention to this area, and he said, hey, if I entrenched this position, put my men on it, I would be able to hold off 10 times the number of men that I had. He said it was a virtual Gibraltar, so he should hold it. But that was not in the plans of the Southern Army commanders that day. He was supposed to launch the attack down this hill and up the next hill and hit the end of the northern line wherever he may find it. And he rued the fact in his book that he was ordered to continue the attack, and he felt he should have been able to stay here and create a defensive position for the Southern Army. And a lot of people have noted this and written about this over the years. But I think it's worthy to point out that this is the area that he was referring to when he used the term Gibraltar.
Hey, I'm Doug Ullman. I'm standing up here now near the crest of Big Round Top, following along with Gary and Tim and Chris. And I'm here at the monument to the 20th Maine. Now, this is not the monument you're used to seeing down on Vincent Spur. This is their second monument to their capturing or their arriving here on Big Round Top. It's interesting to note that in both his official reports and in his Medal of Honor citation, it mentions Big Round Top, and that Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, who we think of as being known for the bayonet charge, was also just as excited about having captured, in his words, or taken the big hill right here, Big Round Top. So this monument marks their position here. There are also some flank markers that are typical of the main state flank markers that you see here on the Gettysburg battlefield. But on your way up here, you will see monuments to other regiments even from other divisions and other corps. Those are from other units that came up here later on during the battle, including the 119th Pennsylvania of the 1st Division of the 6th Corps, who came up here basically after any major fighting was done. There is, however, contention between Chamberlain and Joe Fisher of the Pennsylvania Reserves, who believed that his regiment was the first Union troops to come up and occupy this hill. Ultimately, it's one of those things where you have two men later in life fighting over who did what. It was dark. They would both come up here. They both end up putting their monuments here, and that's kind of where we end up in this conversation. Now, as we're getting up to the top of Big Round Top, I would be remiss if I did not point out the Civil War Trust, or the American Battlefield Trust's battle app for the Battle of Gettysburg. This is the Gettysburg Battlefield app that the Trust worked on. I worked on this personally, and it is a GPS-enabled map that allows you to tour the battlefield, and it points out a few key points of interest along the way. I say a few because you're not going to see every monument or marker in this app. It's only those main points of interest and what we call virtual signs that are going to tell you about the action of the battlefield. So if you are out here, especially for first-timers, you want to learn a little bit more about what you're seeing along the way, definitely download this app and watch, see what you can find as you're touring the field.
This is my second time to the top of Big Round Top, and the thing that has impressed me, particularly as we've been coming up the old road, is the terrible terrain. And we talked a little earlier about how those two Alabama regiments sort of have to veer off and come up over the crest of Big Round Top. As the flank of the Confederate attack, you absolutely have to make sure that your flank is protected. So as those Alabama regiments are drawn up here by the 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters, they have to cross terrain that is brutal. And we can see some of the rocks here, and of course there have been some reconstructed stone walls built up around them as well. But imagine trying to keep your formation shoulder to shoulder, making an advance up over this hill. And they don't come right up over the top, they come over the northern face with their right flank toward the top of the mountain. So they're not only going over the mountain, but they're going around the mountain. Tim Smith and I were talking about this just a few moments ago. So imagine trying to hold your position through this sort of terrain, and as you get further down the mountain, of course you've had all these boulders roll down, so the terrain gets even worse down there. So it's no wonder that these Alabamians, on the second hottest day of the year, no water, through jumbled terrain, find themselves nearly exhausted when they finally get into combat over there by Little Round Top. So fantastic view, totally worth the walk up here. We're going to head all the way, the rest up to the crest.
Okay. I am currently standing at the highest point at the Gettysburg National Military Park. We're on the summit of Big Round Top. And according to the Warren map, I am 666 feet above sea level. Now, when the Warren map was drawn, they hadn't connected the topography lines all the way, the elevations all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. So later in the 1880s, when they did it, it was found that the Warren map's elevations were 120 feet off of their benchmark. So in point of fact, we're 786 feet above sea level here at Big Round Top. Now, troops of the 5th Army Corps and 6th Army Corps spent a night up here on July 2nd, throughout July 3rd and July 4th. Imagine being on top of the summit during the fighting of Pickett's charge. It's kind of an interesting place. Big Round Top today, there are some rock carvings even up here. On this rock over here below me, you might be able to see on the lower part of the rock, it's J. Crumlish. And then up on top of the rock, someone has chalked it in with pink chalk. It says J. Hinchcliffe, and there's a J. Noble. I guess J was a popular first name then, John or James. But you can find rock carvings up here. It's a nature walk to the top of the hill, and you can visit the highest location at Gettysburg.
So here on the crest of Big Round Top, you can just see, I mean, what a difference it is to hold the crest. I mean, the Confederates are on Big Round Top on the late afternoon, early evening of July 2nd, and they're going to hold it for a lot of July 3rd as well, spending a lot of that time restructuring the commingled brigades that Tim had talked about earlier, okay? But there is some, sharp fighting on Big Round Top. There are accounts talking about how Union soldiers, one might have even been rolling a rock down the hill and going behind it like Last of the Mohicans or something like that. You've got Confederates over there being shot, and some of them still holding their guns, and they're found in the gaze of death the next day. It's an interesting study to learn about the slopes of Big Round Top, as a matter of fact. But while I'm up here, I wanted to show you some of the natural remnants of a post-war feature. You've seen it before. Chris, if you'll walk over here first. I walk over here, and Tim already sort of mentioned this, but you walk over and you see some, a post sort of sticking out of some modern-looking concrete right here, okay? If you go right across from here, literally making a square, you can see a sort of maybe potentially disreputable individual sitting, just kidding, right on this base. This looks like a clear base right here. I mean, this is a heavy base meant to hold something heavy. Let's go over here, and we can see a third one. Right there, I see another square base there, and there's another one that's missing. So that's 3 of the 4 bases of what? The 4 feet of the 1896 steel observation tower, erected by the Cleveland Variety Iron Works under contract from the Gettysburg National Military Park Commission. It was an incredible view. Gettysburg's highest hill, crowned by a 75-foot tower. It's not here anymore. I never got to go up it. It came down right around when I was born in the late 1960s. Let's bring Tim Smith up here for the promised stories about the tower and the birds and the people atop.
So, it was, while this tower existed, it was sort of a, kind of a bucket list thing that all Gettysburg visitors would do. They'd park at the base of Big Round Top, they'd climb up the hill, they'd climb up the tower, and they'd have this magnificent view of the Gettysburg National Military Park. But eventually, the tower fell into disrepair. Can you imagine having to climb all the way up to the top of the hill to repair the tower? And besides that, at one time, Gettysburg was filled with vultures. When Garry and I first started making videos, it was probably at its height, and on any given day in the winter, you would come over to Devil's Den, and there would be 100 or sometimes upwards of 200 vultures in the edge of the woods. And the vultures roosted in rocks, and they roosted in the tower, and it became an extreme problem. And at that time, in the 60s, the park was open 24 hours. So the tower also was a place where local Gettysburg kids tended to have parties. And at some point, the park just decided it wasn't worth it, and they tore the tower down. And it's unfortunate that we don't have that exciting view of the battlefield that visitors had for many, many years prior to that. But I tell you, in the Gettysburg community, I've heard lots of stories about the tower. Lots of people have fond memories of it. I read an article in our local newspaper where in the 1930s, a couple was married on the top of the Big Round Top Tower at midnight, because apparently that is the place where they first met. And when I was a young battlefield guide, and one night I was in the Plaza restaurant in the center of town, the site of the Blue and Gray Bar and Grill now, I was talking about the Big Round Top Tower. People knew I was interested in it, and they were telling me stories about it. And this one lady, I say this, we're talking about in the 1990s, and she must have been 75 or 80 years old. She yelled out to everyone in the bar, "I lost my virginity in the Big Round Top Tower." So a lot of people regret the fact that the tower isn't here anymore. But still, it's a very nice climb to the summit of Big Round Top, and especially in the winter when there's not as many leaves on the trees, you get an awesome view of the area around it.
So you heard it here, a 70-some-year-old woman in the 1990s, after the tower was torn down, lost her virginity above this spot. And I don't think we have anything else to add. Chris, Tim, and Doug, thanks for joining us, and thank you for watching and supporting whatever this was, but especially battlefield preservation.